Okay, we're going to get into part 3 of the foolishness here on this guy who thinks that 144 is Superman and that blacks are somehow in the Bible or mentioned in any way, shape, or form. We'll tear that ass apart, and he really needs to get rid of Cosby on his background and maybe a couple of others. But as we recap here, we're talking about the slavery trade and how there really isn't any history to blacks because they had no written language before then, that they did hoe some fields and didn't build America, that Abraham Lincoln didn't even want to free the slaves, and it says it clearly in his speeches that he didn't plan on doing it, but used it in such to ruin the South to where he could take control of them. And then later there was, of course, segregation and laws to keep blacks separate and allowed for quite some time until they got to the point that they might be able to compete and make it. And we've gotten all the way to the point now where a half black person has actually been a president of the United States, and something fantastic. But then this guy here wants to try to take everything and twist it around, and he likes to take off the glasses and tell you about a conspiracy theory that he's come up with, that, oh my God, black people are in the Bible. So let's just, I don't know where we were at here. We're going to get here pretty close, I guess. It was somewhere where it was telling about how the Israelites and all the white people had used to have been in slavery before, and it's well documented, but he's trying to think that just because they say slavery, it's blacks, and he goes. Let's look into that.
To entreat them that they would take the yoke from them, for they saw that the kingdom of the Grecians did oppress Israel with servitude. After you came from the Greek captivity, you went back into the land of Israel, rebuilt the temple because the Greeks were sacrificing swine and pig on the altars. No sooner as you came back to the land of Israel, then the Romans came and had you during the time of Christ as slaves.
Yep. Yeah, them Caucasians, man, they used to enslave people, and way back in elder times when one person group captured another, they would utilize the other in their civilization to do different things, and quite often they would displace a people. They would take people from way over here and put them way over there, so they just were like disoriented somewhat whenever they did this. This was done a couple of times in elder times, and boy, it sure worked out great on those Sumerians, didn't it? And so they did it to a few others, but none of these were involved with black people in any way, shape, or form.
There was so much slavery going on with the Israelites that Jeremiah himself had to ask. He had to say, is Israel just put on earth just to be slaves? Is that your whole purpose? Just to be servitude to other nations?
Well, funny that he mentions that, because in the Bible, the Noah curse was supposed to have gone the other way, but we find that to go totally a different way. This perhaps is one certain people saying that it was supposed to have been them, and it really wasn't. In fact, everything in history points that it wasn't. And none of these people are black people, but let's look at what Jeremiah does say.
Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? So
clearly
you might
stated.
be asking yourself, if the so-called Negro is part of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Oh, no, they're not. And I don't know why they always want to so-called, the so-called. Yeah, everybody's so-called. Everybody, Americans are so-called Americans because it's in America. And these so-called Negroes are the people that weren't involved in any of this. They're a totally different genetics. They didn't have anything to do with this. There isn't some magic black people. It's not going to happen. It didn't.
How in the world did you get to the west coast of Africa?
Oh, now he's going to try to show you some way how they could have possibly gotten all the way through the Sahara Desert, all the way around and into West Africa, and somehow went to be a primitive, illiterate, non-intelligent people who never did anything magically. But this won't work, but we're going to try it.
When ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is not I. This is...
Yep, Jesus said whenever they encompass the wall around there, that it's about to go. And they even tell you clearly, don't grab your clothes, don't do nothing. Take your ass out of there. If you see it, you know. Leave now. Do not wait, do not tarry, do not look back. Kind of like Lot. Get your ass out, because it's about to happen. Flee into the mountains, which are real close to there, and nowhere near where he's going to try to equate. Watch this one.
Christ right here speaking to the Israelites. He says, when you see Jerusalem compassed or surrounded by the Roman armies, then know that.
Just know that that nose right there looks like what's on all the Akkadian and Sumerians and stuff, and that nose, that curled nose like this and this, is what you see in those blue-eyed statues.
The desolation or the destruction of the land of Israel is getting ready to happen.
Yep, it did say the desolation of Israel is about to happen, and Josephus records it in the Jewish revolt when it does happen as the abomination of desolation. Even my brother, who's a devout Christian and a deacon of a church, knows that all of Revelation happened, and it was all pointing towards Rome and its conquest of it, and Titus. And what he doesn't agree with is the fact that deified Titus and his father Vespasian, the wasp, who's in the Old Testament, as being the person who it points to as being the second coming, exactly a 40-year generation to the day of Jesus calling it out. And of course, this was just written later back at it going, he said this, here they are, da 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 da.
Romans getting ready to come in here and tear some stuff up.
Yep.
Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out. And Christ says, when you see the Romans coming in, you better get ready to flee into the mountains.
Now, look which way he's pointing compared to a map.
And what you're going to realize is that the mountains that he was talking about was the land of Africa. It was the same exact
the mountains. So he says, you better flee up into the mountains right over here. Better flee up into the mountains right over here. And so this guy tries to say, well, those mountains were in Egypt. That Egypt is mountains. Well, if you look in Egypt, there aren't really any mountains. There's some crestings going on through here and some hillock type things that come through here and here. What's he going to go all the way west to the Atlas Mountains and the land of the Phoenicians and Carthaginians and the Adamic Caucasian Berbers that were there? Let's see where he tries to take these people.
That Mary and Joseph took Jesus when they were fleeing from Herod when he was trying to come find Jesus to kill him.
Well, that says they went to Egypt. It never says they went into Africa. Well, Africa is part of Egypt, but he's trying to equate it to some sub-Saharan Negroid Africa, and none of that's ever mentioned. You look at Herodotus' old maps, and they don't even show you it exists. They really don't know that it exists. It comes along much later. Neither do the black people that live there know that any of the rest of the world exists. But he can't have that. Truth.
Went right into Africa. And the Israelites went into Africa as well, fleeing from the Romans. In the year 65 BC, the Roman armies under General Pompey captured Jerusalem. In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son Titus put an end to the Jewish state with great slaughter. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa, fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery. The slave markets were full of black Jewish slaves.
Oh, snap. No, the slave markets there, you can look, I've got another video on Deuteronomy where it describes that they were trying to sell the Jewish into slavery, and there were too much Islamic black slaves and things going on. The slave markets were so full, they couldn't be sold. So just like the Bible said, you won't be sold, and you'll be passed on and on and on. All this actually went down with these Hebrews right here. Yep, these Israelites, these Caucasians. None of it had to do with Negroes at all.
Over 1 million of you Israelites fled from the land of Israel into the land of Africa.
And quite a few other places. Up north, up northeast into the mountains that Jesus talked about. The same mountains Jesus was taken to supposedly where he could see all of the nations, which also did not include anyone except for the Caucasian nations right around there. This Bible is about that area. It's not about the world. It's about that little area there. Notice you go a little farther east and you have these India people. They have their own little thing and it has nothing to do with it. And somebody standing on a mountain pointing around thousands of miles away means nothing to them whatsoever. They have their own gods. So do the Asians, so do other people. It's amazing how the Caucasians helped each one of those, and Negroids, but we can't talk about that either, I guess.
Running away from the Romans, because the Romans was coming to put slaughter to the Israelites. The ones that didn't take heed to the prophecy of Christ, when he said you better leave and go to the mountains, go to Africa, when they got caught by the Romans, they were taken back to Europe and sold in slavery and put in servitude.
Yep, they sure were. And ones that didn't sell ended up, first they were sold as craftsmen, then they were sold as people that were skilled workers, then they were sold as just anybody could do anything. Pretty soon they were so cheap they weren't even worth a meal of food, supposedly it said. There were just far too many of them and nobody wanted slaves. Nobody really did too much slavery crap back then. It wasn't like the world lived off slavery. People would need extra people to help and work. They would indenture in a slave, work him for 7 years and get him back out of there. Usually if he did a damn good job, they'd give him a piece of land. This is the way chattel slavery and biblical slavery all was. It was a previously freed black man in America named Anthony Johnson who went to court and tried to make his own black slave, John Kasor, stay a lifetime slave over some BS he brought up. And sure enough, he did such a good job in court, he won and made a statute to where blacks were lifetime slaves and made the first person ever in America that was owned lifetime by anybody a black man. But they want to ignore that and the fact that the blacks were capturing the blacks and selling their own people off as unwanted, like some kind of drive-through slave mart. And they want you to believe white people were trying to chase down black people with big, heavy nets. Yeah, it's kind of disgusting. It's that Roots thing. Of course, Alex Haley's Roots was a plagiarism off of a white person's book, and he had to pay out for it, but that's kind of hidden to black people too. If you look it up, though, Alex Haley and that whole story, the whole idea of it, the topics, everything, places, names, was all taken out of another person's book, and that person was a Caucasian. And it was a fallacy book too, wasn't even reality. Well stated.
And became gladiators, put in the lions' dens. The pagans
Christians,
and the Romans attacked the Jews indiscriminately. Both the Jewish soldiers and the uninvolved peaceful population without mercy. As a result of this merciless attack, many Jews fled to those parts of northwest Africa known as Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and Mauritania. Many other Jews fled to other areas where Rome did not have any jurisdiction. This was to the region of the south, the Sahara Desert, and the Sudan. Grazel says, such is the explanation of how the Sahara Desert first acquired Jewish tribes, toughened by a fighting tradition and possessed of physical characteristics, black, which, it is said, still makes them approximate very closely the original Jewish population of Palestine. And after migrating...
Nope. And after these Caucasians migrated up into Egypt, which was always Caucasians, and up into the Horn of Africa area, knowing that they were far away from the Romans, and if the Romans started to come, they could go farther. All they needed was word that they were coming, and they would have took off further. And of course, he mentions right there all of these endemic North African Caucasian people that they came and splintered themselves into, running away from Roman persecution. And none of those was Negroids at all, but he tries to throw it in there.
From Israel and dwelling on the northwestern parts of Africa, after you were fighting vigorously with the Romans, you had no choice but to start migrating to the southern regions of Africa, where
it was the people who weren't fighting vigorously. The people that fought vigorously died and were killed all off. It was the people who did what Jesus said and left that ended up making it to these places. It was the cowards who ended up leaving with their women and such in the diaspora in the 7 years of trials and tribulations between 66 AD, the starting of the Jewish revolt, till the end of it at 73 AD at Har-Megiddo, up on some mountains like Jesus told him to go to. And none of those are in Africa either. But let's continue how he tries to get some people into primitive pre-Stone Age West Africa.
Romans didn't have any jurisdiction because the Romans were relentless and they were adamant about putting all Israelites to death. So in order to get any type of peace, the Israelites had to start migrating to the sub-Saharan parts of Africa.
No, they went up into the mountains like Jesus said that were near there. They went to quite a few places that were near there. Some diaspora came off into Egypt and North Africa, but they didn't end up coming into sub-Saharan Africa. That's a foolish idea. Sure, they delved from the coast up into the desert areas and stuff, but of course, Mali and all those empires were started by Caucasians in the first place. And that's already been proven before it's due. But let's continue.
The scholars know this for a fact.
Yep, they know for a fact that black people had nothing to do with it. Cranial information, everything proves it, DNA and everything proves it nowadays, but we didn't need that. You just look at reality and you can tell that that ain't true. Look at that look on her face.
The biblical scholars know this for a fact.
Yep.
They know all the history of the Israelites and the migrants.
Yeah, and they know that Hamites are a division of the Caucasian race of all North Africa and Egypt. It's plainly stated. They made the definition. They stated. It's that simple. Blacks are going, no. Well, you can't change definitions, people. You can't twist it to make a dung hut lie. You can't do that. They try. It's sad.
Migration patterns. Whatever may be thought of the more or less mythological traditions connected with the earliest Jews in North Africa, it is now practically an established fact that a Jewish nation, Jewish at least in faith, and perhaps too in origin, long held sway south of the Sahara.
It's a well-known fact that the Jewish slave masters enslaved and domesticated the Negroids that are there. It's a well-known fact that Negroids cling to the slave masters' books, as in how many Negroids are in Islam now when Islam started the slave trade 900 years before the Jewish slave masters got their crap back together after the Barbary Coast pirate situation and decided to take an easy ploy on Negroids that I think we all realize was a mistake now.
In later centuries, Jews are believed to have settled in Western Africa during the height of the Songhai, Mali, Ghana, and Kanem-Bornu empires. According to accounts from explorers of the region, several powerful Jewish families of the Songhai Empire were of Jewish origin.
So Caucasians were there and they were leading the people at that time? Amazing that he points that out.
Some accounts place West African Jewish communities in the Andu Forest of Dahomey, south of Timbuktu. In the 1930s, these groups still maintained a Torah scroll written in Aramaic that had been
transposed and burnt into a piece of paper, so those people could never have tried to change it to say that they were involved in it. It's written in Aramaic, and those people don't speak that language. Aramaic is an Afro-Asiatic language that comes out of Aramea and Armenian type people and is far away from any Negroid whatsoever and had nothing to do with their language. They sit and hold a book not in their language about some people that enslaved them a long time ago, and they still revere that fact. These holy people. No, they're not trying to say they were the holy people, that they were sucked into this religion that has nothing to do with them.
Burned into parchment with a hot iron instead of ink so it could not be changed. In the 1930s, the historians went over there and still found Israelites over there that didn't get captured in the slave trade, still practicing the Hebraic faith, still knowing
that they were prognostic-jawed, primitive Negroids that didn't have any sense, and these people brought them sense. Still in the 1930s and to this day, these people in this area will not tell you that they were the people out of the Bible, that was the Caucasians. It's just the American Negroid who can't understand and really wants to place himself into any place other than West Africa. Wants to attach himself to anything but West African primitives.
They were. With a Torah, which is the first 5 books of Moses,
with a Jewish white man,
written in Aramaic. That's the ancient language.
No, that's not the ancient language. The ancient language goes way, way back. There's a Proto-Indo-European language that's attached to Indo-European languages, the Aryan-type languages, and the languages that led through to Phoenicians, which is what Hebrew comes from, and Greek, and all these people and how they attach all together, and how it originally comes from Sumerians, these blue-eyed people who lived in Sumeria, Aryans of Sumer, who had cuneiform writing, which diasporas itself up through Anatolia by via way of the 2 rivers of the Bible, the Tigris and Euphrates, leading up into there. Now, they also have attachment definitely to the Egyptians, where they too had cuneiform writing beginning out. They too had mastabas and things for their original pyramids, which slowly became into step pyramids. And those same people got all their cattle, as well as any black people or any African whatsoever. All those cattle come from Anatolia and the Caucasian people that were up in that area who had originally started and domesticated cattle and all the grains. And none of this had to do with Negroids either.
And it's a shame that they have to burn it in hot iron so the European colonialists don't come over there tampering with it and
so the local black people don't tamper with it.
Taking the evidence and trying to hide the history.
Nobody's hiding any history. 1930s, it's a joke that you try to bring up 1930s as some type of, oh boy.
Shame that they have to do that. It is a total shame that they have to do that.
It is a total shame that black people can't catch reality, and they always want to lie and hate and try to steal from white people.
The black Jews had an advantage over the African tribes. They carried their culture, history, laws, and written records with them. The Jews made use of every opportunity. They were an industrious and skillful people.
Listen to these ideas here telling you about these blacks, supposedly, which he just put the first sentence on there, and then from then on just goes with real language, just not putting the word black in there after. It throws black in the first, but they're very industrious people. They were skilled. They took advantage of opportunities. Let's see what they say.
Jewish Ghanaian states were found kings, princes, governors, generals, secretaries, treasurers, revenue agents, judges, architects, engineers, doctors, historians, language interpreters, mathematicians, jewelers, sculptors, masons, carpenters, painters of art, goldsmiths, leather workers, potters, armorers, saddlers, blacksmith, agriculturalists, etc.
And none of that has to do with anything of the Negroids. They didn't have any of that whenever we found them. Quite a few tribes still to this day don't have any of that. The ones that do are in the domesticated, or what we call westernized areas. And now you're going to go, oh, we were always like this. And it's like, no, you weren't. No, you weren't. You're not going to change history and try to say some lies and bullshit. It's nice to try to consider you even or equal in some way as far as laws and things goes. And that's the way that went. But as far as equal on completions or doing things or accomplishments, one of these two can fly now and went up into space, zoom, and the other one still relies pot-bellied on millions of dollars a year just to sustain themselves in their own land that they can't keep up with. Nor can they build into a cohesive unit or do anything that has anything to do with that. It just doesn't seem to get there. Every good place turns into a slum. It's getting better and better slowly, But we're not going to be able to say, oh, see, no. Back it up, and you get to the point of the primitive, illiterate, pre-Stone Age, non-Masonic stoneworking Negroids.
Who told you that you was a bunch of Negroes running around on the west coast of Africa, butt naked, swinging from vines?
Reality, and God told you that. But I don't think you were swinging from vines like monkeys and crap. That's a stupid statement. Although Tarzan, he white man, he rule Africa. Tarzan, he white man, he swing from vines. Tarzan loved Jane.
Who told you that lie? You were and still are a prestigious people.
Yeah.
A skillful people.
Yeah.
The decline of Jewish communities of the West African Maghreb most likely began with the influx of Arab invaders into North Africa starting in 640 CE and later into West Africa in the 1300s and 14 CE. So
Africa was always Caucasian all the way across there, in Carthage and Tunisia and all these places, and the Arabs came in and ruined that whole area as they did and took it over and became what you know of as the Moors, which everybody says, oh, they took over Europe, and no, they didn't. They took over a part of Spain, jumping across the Klitsch there for a while and couldn't advance any farther than that. And it took a while, but they eventually got pushed back out. But if you look at these people, they also had red hair and so on going on too. These Arabs at this time, apparently, and Moors, aren't exactly the people that you see today, which don't have any red hair, but they revere Muhammad, who had red hair, and they put red stuff in their beards and things to pay homage to the situation. And I've actually shown where he's kin to the Queen of England through a long drawn out way too, of kings that were in Spain, but that's another story through Isabella and such. None of this has to do with Negroids.
you had established communities and empires on the west coast of Africa, after the 7th century, that's when Muhammad and his band of thugs came down there to the west coast with the Quran in one hand and a sword in another one. And they were...
Yeah, they started the Jewish slave trade, but we won't call it that then because it wasn't Jews. It was the Islamic slave trade, which began 900 years before the Americas were even found. And that's where all that started at. Now, when we talk about Maghreb and Berbers and all these people, those people have nothing to do with these Negroids. They really don't at all until they start domesticating them. To this day, they domesticate them. And then if you look at the serf system that they started up eventually when they had mulattoes with these people and so on, those were the very bottom of the rung.
Forcibly converting the Israelites into that nonsense Islam. Yeah, I said it, nonsense Islam, because that's...
Yep, a lot of blacks are transposed into a religion they knew nothing about, a nonsense Islam, much like, Barry. Yeah, our recent president that just got knocked out, and everybody realizes now from the things that he did that, whoa, that wasn't good at all. And our national debt has doubled just during his short time. It's disgusting what was allowed to happen in the name of an attempt, equality, and freedom.
Not what we were dealing with. That's the Arabs' religion. That's not what we were dealing with.
No, you were dealing with witch doctors and cannibalisms and voodoo bullshit. None of this is your religion. You didn't even know it existed. None of those people ever saw a pyramid or anything whatsoever, or even a book, or even writing where someone could read it. It was like magic to them. Might as well have had a Bic lighter.
And that was the decline of the Hebraic community over there in the west coast of Africa. And that was the forefront in the beginning of the slave trade.
Now, that was the beginning of the decline of North America and how the diaspora from there left and came up into Europe. And, of course, they had already done so before previously, so it was easy for them to do so. And to try to escape Barbary pirates and things along that range. When you look at things like Barbarossa, Barbarossa means a red-beard pirate. That's where the idea of red beard comes from. Now, once the Jewish slave masters got into it, Why is it that they don't want to get rid of their black pearl?
Yea, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coast of Palestine? Tyre, Zidon, and the coast of Palestine, those are all ancient Africans that God...
Oh my God, no, those are the Phoenicians, and Carthage and Tunisia and so on are Phoenicians. They're a pale people. They're known to have a large red-headed population with them. That's what Fowen has to go with. And the fact that they made purple dyes and stuff. These are people that were endemic all around there. They're the people that brought language to them, and it had nothing to do with Negroids or this thing right here.
Referring to, will ye render me a recompense? And if ye recompense me, swiftly and speedily will I return your recompense.
Ooh, a recompense. Black people want a recompense. Oh, there you go. There's money. So we're going to give us money. Well, let's just see what happened back then whenever they said they gave them money. Well, if swiftly, speedily, I will return your recompense upon your own head. Yeah, nobody's giving any black people a bunch of money. They're going to use it for wrong situations and stuff. And of course, they weren't owed anything in the first place. So they aren't going to get anything in the second place. Although I think all Americans would get together a couple of $1 trillion and just tell them to all go back, give them the couple of trillion and go, come on, try to make your Wakanda because you're ruining America. And then this racist bullshit. Don't try to say America keeps racism going. Look at this bullshit. This is what keeps it going. This is the black hop around low IQ BS that we have to deal with.
Upon your own head.
And you do it upon your own head.
As ye have taken my silver and my gold, and carried into your temples my goodly pleasant things.
Blacks hear that and then they go, oh, they took all our stuff. They didn't have any stuff. We can give you back a mud hut or a dung hut if you want. A sharp stick.
The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Grecians.
Damn straight. Here's where they got sold into them, and it had nothing to do with black people. It had everything to do with Jewish and Hebrew people and stuff. And the Greeks that controlled the religion at the time. You know, Herod, give unto Caesar. Yeah, see, none of that. There was never no little island of Judea that was all free. They were always annexed up under other people. Under Persians, under Akkadians, before that Egyptians, after that Greeks, Romans. It was never some sacred little island there right in the middle of no, that's not the way that works. And it didn't.
The Africans got together with the so-called Grecians or the Europeans, and they commenced in selling the Israelites that were dwelling on the west coast of Africa in slavery.
Yes, Caucasians of North Africa selling off the people that had come into their land that they did not want. And they started capturing and selling them off as slaves to other lands as workers. And a lot of them went to Greece and stuff. Sure enough, none of them were Negroes.
There's your slave trade right there in the Bible.
Yep, there's your Caucasian slave trade in the Bible, but it goes back way, way farther than that. It's not just something that happened right there, and these were all Caucasians. And Deuteronomy's already happened. But happy 400th anniversary of y'all having somebody finally make it to North America rather than South America, where 92% of the slaves of the Jewish slave masters went to. And none of those were Jewish. Jews weren't allowed to enslave other Jews. It was the only edict they had. It had to be somebody else. You don't do your own people. Come on, that's common sense. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Black people did do their own people. But they had no unity, so it was just any tribe around them they could just capture and sell off. If they could make something off of anything, they wouldn't care. How black people today, man, if they could sell the people the next block over, phew.
Buyers, Europeans, and sellers, Africans, saw the people traded into captivity on the African coast as outsiders.
Yeah, they were outsiders. They weren't considered to be Carthaginians and stuff, and the Carthaginian people knew that, and they go, y'all are the people from over here that screwed up over there. You're not going to come over here and screw up over here now. See, some people back then had common sense.
Now, why did those Africans see you as outsiders? Because you were some people that migrated and encroached on their land.
Sure enough, and now the blacks that are in North Africa really are migrants, and they have encroached on their land, and they're not allowed in there. And they just kicked 40,000 black people out of Israel that were illegally there. It's getting to the point where it's disgusting, where all these people from povertized third world countries are trying to make it up into Europe and say, well, you're supposed to just suck up and do this out of your white guilt. No, out of our white intelligence, we realize that's a big damn mistake. Sure, there were mistakes made in the past, but we're not going to like keep making them, are we? Or could we go back to the old ways? It wouldn't take much, but we don't want to do that. It was the whites that decided to free everyone and the other whites, where there were 6 times more Irish whites than blacks in captivity in America. We decided that was bad. And you know, John Glenn was an Irishman, so just a few generations later, that man went to the moon, zoom! Breaking speed and sound barriers and so on, and flying metal magic machines. Let's see if we can end this with any dignity to the Negroid people, but probably not when he shows you pictures like this.
They knew you were not the same exact people. The customs that you had, the way you moved, they knew you were not the same people, so they had no...
Everybody knew Negroids had nothing to do with any of the Caucasoids or anybody that done anything, and looking at their accomplishments and the way that they lived, knew that they were just a primitive people that could probably be exploited. They're real gullible. Next thing you know, we can get them worshiping our gods. They don't have one. They're appeasing demons.
problem commencing in a slave trade with the Europeans. Do you be crazy to believe that Africans were selling their own people? And
North Africans were selling their own people during the Barbary slave trade. But when we say their own people, these were people invading the other people and doing this. This happened constantly. We've already verified that. You'd be crazy to think that any of these people they're talking about were Negroids at this time. It didn't happen until much later. Negroids didn't even know the world existed.
makes no sense at all.
Nope, it doesn't.
When the Europeans put that in the textbooks, they're using technicalities, saying Africans sold other Africans. When they're using technicalities.
It's not a technicality that North Africans were always Caucasians and Sub-Saharans were where blacks were at. In far western Africa, and the Bantu expansion brought them into everybody else, into places that they never were. Nubians weren't even allowed into Africa by an edict. The Semna Stele of Sinsheret II or third, yes, clearly denotes that, but that's not the only one. There are far, far many other ones that tell you that Negroids aren't even allowed into Egypt. They can come to Icon and trade and stuff, but they're never allowed to come into Egypt or through or down the river past Heh forever. So, not there, not here, not there, not north, no, not till much later. And when they are, they're being westernized. Most of your Islamics were castrating the blacks as eunuchs and using them until they didn't want them anymore, and then to keep from feeding or housing them would just dispose of them, would be a nice way of saying it. They have a lot of things they've said about them, that they had no marriage between them, that they ate lizards, snakes, and other crawling things, and sometimes each other. It's all still written. It's all still there. And the Islamic people still refer to blacks as ibid, the word for slave, to this day. To this day, there are more blacks in captivity than were ever in North America at any one time. No one cares about that. They just want you to just support me with welfare and try to believe my lie.
What they mean to say is native Africans were selling Israelites that were living in Africa.
No, native Africans were selling other native Africans that were in native Africa in the sub-Saharan area, and none of those people are mentioned in the Bible, much less part of the Caucasian people. You don't get some popcorn black to come out. Well, Ham was black. Okay, well, who did he marry? That makes a mulatto. Who does that marry? That makes another mulatto. Well, see, you can't get a black person. You can't even get a black race out of it. It doesn't exist. Look, whenever they talk about the coming out of an ark, those people there, they weren't Asians, they weren't Amerindians, they weren't Eskimos, and they weren't Negroes. It's their story. We're trying to steal it. It's not your story.
It'd be no different if somebody wrote history 500 years from now and say there was a slave trade that happened here in America. Say black people got together and start selling white people to the Chinese.
Boy, he dreams about that, where black people might one day enslave white people. Cause man, yeah, exactly, yeah. No, that wouldn't go on. Now, what does he say? What would people say in the future?
If somebody with the same mindset that the Europeans have wrote history 500 years from now, they would say Americans were selling other Americans to the Chinese.
No, they would say that the Negroids were trying to sell Caucasians to the Asians out of America. They wouldn't say it was just Americans. That's the reason they say African American, clearly denoted. They want to let you know they aren't Americans. They're the African people that came into America. They'll be a separate people. They'll always be referred to that. Really, they should just go back and try to make their own country. It's causing a huge problem, and they can't seem to cope with it. Some can, but the rest are ruining it for all of them. You can see that. And these lies aren't helping in any way, shape, or form. They're making mad racist idiots out of people who might have done something worthwhile for their people, if not done so.
When there's two totally different nation of people living in America. You can't just...
In Africa, there are much more than two separate people living in Africa. Genetics shows you that a lot of people have no connections. West Africans have no connection to any Negroids that are living in East Africa or the Nubians whatsoever. They weren't kin to them, no way. Knew something they knew, no, nothing. Saw something they saw, no, nothing. None of those are related either. But then why they talk about Africa being so diverse is because Negroids have no continuity to them. And then the fact that North and East Africa were always Caucasians and different mixed peoples that were there too. It's the most mixed continent. Why? Well, because Negroids weren't anywhere else. So this was the most diverse continent. It's that simple. Africa's blacks. No, it's not. Africa was a bunch of people. At one time, we believed everybody came up out of there. And everybody didn't come from blacks. Blacks predate nobody. The oldest skull they found of a proto-Negroid is about 12,000 BC. 11,600 or something. So that means no. No, especially when we find modern humans, what we call modern humans, at Cro-Magnon, dating back 38,000 years. And now, in a modern society, we've deduced it back to what it takes to be a modern human, just like we've changed the IQ level and what it would mean to be retarded. We've lowered those numbers. We've changed what it takes to be a modern human, so now Negroids and everybody is a modern human. When we do so, we end up coming back to somewhere between 245 and 315,000 years of Caucasians, predating even modern human that we know of today in Cro-Magnons itself. There'll be a video about that coming out shortly. It'll just be about that information, though, and not really about black lies. It'll be about truth.
Say Americans sold other Americans, two totally different people. It's the same exact scenario on the west coast of Africa. There are both oral and written explanations that trace the origin of the Igbo. And the most tantalizing is an association of the Igbo to the Hebrew race. This assumption is based on the fact that Igbo culture has many similar traditional customs like that of the Jews. Similar customs are observed in marriage negotiations, childbirth and circumcision, restitution, attitude to...
Boy, they like to throw in that restitution.
Totem animals and taboos, as well as hospitality to others, especially to strangers, etc.
Yeah, most Negroids aren't known for any of those things whatsoever, and these people also aren't known for that either. You can cargo your culture self into now having these beliefs, like blacks in America are praising Jesus and stuff, and you go, oh wow, that's not even oral. I can see it today, but blacks aren't in the Bible. They're nothing to do with the lost tribes of Israel. They weren't even a lost tribe. They hear that word tribe, boy, and they're like, oh, it's us, tribe slavery, to me. No, it's not. None of it was.
The Igbo are therefore said to be the split and lost group, or tribe of Israel that refused to wander further northeast with Moses, but preferred going down southward.
No, that's not them either in any way, shape, or form. And then, of course, they have the Danites and stuff that went north and decided not to do that. And those went up into, up into Europe. Europe, of course, is named for a Phoenician princess, Europa, and white girl. And those Danites ended up coming up into France and the Danube and Scandinavians and Denmark and all these places. And Danes are all named from Dan and where that origin comes from. And when the people compiled the Bible, the people and groups that they knew of that came from elder names, and they had used those as the 12 tribes, which there's really 13 of, but we don't need to go there.
The Igbo people have many Jewish traditions
that they've adopted.
Naomi Katz, the current Israeli ambassador in Nigeria, and others point to their possible ancient Israelite origins.
See, they want to point towards some ancient Israelite origins, but they don't have any. There's no way for a Negroid to be in that Bible. It's not part of it. It never was. It won't be. And I think that's the end of this guy's little series on this one. Hey, he's got a few other videos where he says, no, they're not the Hebrews. They're the Egyptians. Then he's got another video that goes, no, they're not the Hebrews or the Egyptians. They were the Islamic Moors that in this video he tells you about. It's funny. They flip-flop like a pancake. One of those might stick to the wall. Maybe somebody will believe one of them. No, and all of it makes you look disgustingly pitiful. Peace. Like, share, and subscribe. And this won't be ignored.